I'll start with financing. So we were just talking about private lending from friends and family. And one of the keys to that was just listening. So I had this kind of core group of friends and family that expressed interest in real estate. They had been involved in real estate in their past, and I expressed interest in real estate. And so it was just little comments like, hey, if you get a deal, let me know. I've got this self-directed IRA. I'd be interested in lending on it potentially. And so when I first heard that comment the first time, I wasn't ready with a deal, but it was maybe 6 months or 12 months later that eventually I was ready. And so I put that comment in the back of my mind and brought that back up and said, hey, man, I have this deal. You previously mentioned that you were interested. Be happy to talk to you about this deal if you're interested in lending. And so that's what led to a successful experience with that private lender. I'll tell you, I kind of had two first deals, and so I'll tell you about both of them. So the first deal was a home for myself, and then the first deal was my first single family flip that I did. So the first deal that I did myself was a house that I planned to live in. I purchased it from auction.com. It was an auction, and it was I haven't bought a house at auction since, but this was a property that you were allowed to view beforehand. I think a lot of the auctions you cannot look inside, but for whatever reason you were able to get a tour. And so I contacted the agent that was giving tours, and so I gave it a tour, and this was a really rough property. It had holes in the walls, holes in the floor, but it had really good bones, including a side entrance to the basement that created a possibility of a house hack. And so at this point, I was going into a year of teaching. I had almost no money, but I saw this incredible potential in this deal. And so I got some comps from an agent and ended up purchasing this single family property for $135,000. And
where was it?
It needed everything. So it was in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
Okay.
Cheyenne, Wyoming is where I've done the majority of my real estate deals. It was a really rough property, but it had great bones. And so I was willing to do the hard work myself. So I was going into a year of teaching. I bought this over the summer, was able to do a bunch of work over the summer. And my goal was to have it livable by the time the school year started, because I knew my rehab time was going to be significantly reduced once teaching started. And so I had it livable. I had the kitchen functional, had a bathroom functional. We had a place to sleep. And so then, over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, I just chipped away at it and fixed it up and created a second unit in the basement, and was able to house hack that first residence for my wife and I. At the time, we had no kids, and so we were able to be really scrappy and kind of live in a construction zone at that point.
She must really love you.
Yeah. I mean, to her credit, she saw the vision. So, we were doing the Bigger Pockets thing together. We would listen to these podcasts and get inspired, and she saw the vision, and so she really believed in it. Awesome. So that was really great. And then, so the first deal was, we had some success on this kind of live-in flip house hack kind of thing. And so we got connected with the local real estate meetup in our town, and we talked with another investor who was selling a couple deals. This was, this was the kind of flipper who does like 50 or 60 flips in a year. So they had a couple deals that they, it was, at the time they said they had too many projects, but I'm sure these projects were just a headache, and they didn't want to deal with them. And so we bought a single family home from them for $67,000. And this was the purchase where we used balance transfers, 0% credit card balance transfers, and some private money to buy that house and rehab it. And we learned so many lessons along the way. I did a bunch of work myself, hired out some of the work. That was largely a summer project for me, but it worked out really well. I think we ended up making about $38,000 on that single family flip. And And then we ended up buying a duplex that was on the same street. It was unlisted. It had a sign in the front yard, but it was unlisted. And so, I investigated that and was like, wow, it's a 1% deal on this duplex. And so that was my first duplex that I bought. And I knew about it because of that single family flip. And so those first few deals are so important to build confidence and establish that track record that your numbers, you know how to get the work done, and you can be successful at this.
Great advice. Yeah, and that was super savvy of you. Most people buying their first properties for themselves, especially, aren't going to auction.com. I mean, they're going to the MLS, they're getting a buyer's agent, and I think that was really smart, and to look for a property that works as a house hack. I've said it so many times on this show. House hacking is the best personal finance decision you can make, in my opinion. So it sets you up for that next flip and more deals after that. So I think that's where a lot of people either accelerate their real estate investing or it dies right there on that first deal, because it can go one of two ways typically. And I talked to a lot of people who are a decade later, they're like, yeah, I did a deal 10 years ago and it went sideways. So I stopped and now I want to get started again, so I'm glad to hear that it went so well. So what was the transition point from residential to that office building? What year was that, and how did you decide that you were going to make that change?
I bought the office building in early 2022.
Okay.
So not that long ago, just over 2 years ago. And there were multiple kind of inflection points that made me go that direction. I still owned plenty of small multifamily at that time. Deals were getting harder to come by. In 2018, 2019, even 2020, I was buying 1% deals off the MLS. So 1% deal, if gross rents are $2,500, then you can pay $250,000 for it. That's gross monthly rents being $2,500. That's kind of quick back of the napkin math that I use to know, hey, is this deal worth pursuing or is this a pass? And so if something hits the 1% mark, I know, hey, I should look into this deal a little more. I was buying those off the MLS. I bought duplexes, multiple fourplexes that were 1% deals and did really well. There definitely seemed to be a shift during the COVID years, 2020, 2021, where people got super interested in real estate and housing prices just really skyrocketed. And it was really tough to find these deals. That office building was kind of an experiment. I had some 1031 money to use, and this office building had been sitting vacant in my town for, it was probably on the market for 6 to 9 months. And I was really intrigued by it. It just seemed like a challenge, and it seemed like a natural transition from multifamily to the non-residential world. This office building was divided up into
I'm sorry
10
to
small...
interrupt. Can you explain what the 1031 is too, for people who might not understand what you meant by you had 1031 money available for?
Sure. So 1031 exchange is a way to defer capital gains taxes on the sale of a rental property. So I sold, let's say, I sell a duplex and I'm going to make $50,000 in capital gains taxes. Instead of paying the 15 to 20% capital gains tax on the sale of that property, I can do what's called a 1031 exchange. There's lots of hoops to jump through, but if you follow the rules correctly and you do it right, you can roll that money into another property, and in exchange, you don't have to pay taxes on it. And one strategy is to just keep kicking the can down the road. And there's a phrase that goes swap till you drop. And so if you keep 1031ing again and again and again, then you never have to pay these taxes, and then you die and your properties are passed on to your heirs, and then your heirs get a step up in basis, and they don't have to pay taxes on it either. And so it's a tax strategy. It doesn't eliminate taxes necessarily, but it defers taxes. And so I'm a fan of the 1031 strategy. There are plenty of investors that do not like 1031s because it can kind of box you in a little bit with some of the rules and timing deadlines. But if I can make it happen, I'm all for at least trying a 1031 exchange. So, so I had this money to put down on a new property, and I just like these challenges, and so this office building seemed like an interesting challenge, and so it was already divided into 10 different offices, and so it felt like a natural transition from multifamily to non-residential properties. And so I thought, hey, I can buy this property and I can find small business owners that are going to lease up these offices. And so that was my plan, and it did work. There were tons of lessons along the way. I kept that property for about 18 months and made some money on it, and was able to upgrade into another property after that. And so, I was able to take money from that property, buy an industrial property with the proceeds from that property. And so I love these different properties and these different challenges because I can learn so many lessons and become a better investor for it along the way.
Yeah, awesome. So can you share a little bit about that deal then? What'd you buy it for? And then what type of tenants did you get in there to rent it?
Sure. So that office property, great location, right near downtown. About 20,000 cars per day pass by that property. 20,000 cars is a really good. So vehicles per day is a metric that people in the commercial world use to kind of give an idea about how busy is this area. And 20,000, when you get to 15 to 20,000, you know it's got some decent traffic flow. And 15 to 20,000 would be my minimum if I'm buying an office or retail property for how many cars per day I would want. You want eyeballs on that property. If it's tucked away where nobody knows about it, it can be hard to find tenants. And so this was in a location where people know about this property. Tons of people pass by it. And so if you put a sign out front, people are going to see it and they're going to read that sign. And so I purchased that property for $500,000. And I put about $200,000 down, and I got a bank loan for $300,000. This was a vacant property. It is not easy to get financing on a vacant office building, especially now. But I was able to do it because I had a relationship with this bank. I'd probably done 15 deals with this bank. And so I have a relationship with this banker where I can pretty much just send him an email with some brief details about this deal. I can say, hey, are you interested in lending on it? He'll email me back and say, yep, looks good. And, a lot of times that's the extent of the underwriting that I go through with this particular bank. So the banking relationship was crucial in order to get financing on this. And so I bought it completely vacant, except for a satellite dish that was on the roof. So one of the cool things about these commercial properties is there are sometimes these creative income streams. Like some properties will have a billboard on their property, and you lease out the billboard to a billboard company and they pay you rent and you don't have to do anything. Well, similar to the satellite dish, this satellite dish was being leased out to some company. I don't even know what the satellite dish was for, but they were paying me $700 a month to have a satellite dish on the roof. And so it wasn't taking up square footage inside the building, wasn't taking up an office.
That's awesome.
They would just pay me to, they used a little bit of electricity, that kind of thing. But other than that satellite dish, it was completely vacant. And so I wanted to make this, my vision for this office property was to make this kind of a hub for small business owners. And so I wanted to make it really easy for small business owners to come in. So I ended up leasing these offices to bookkeepers, accountants, a massage therapist, a painter, a construction guy. So people like that need an office outside of their home, because we've all learned over the last few years, it is really hard to have an office in your home, especially if you've got kids or pets or something like that. It's just hard to get stuff done at home. And so this was an all-inclusive office suite that would include wireless internet, parking, all utilities. I charge about $500 a month per office, and people could come in. They had 24-hour access to the office building, and everything was included. They had their own locked office that was just for them, and so it wasn't like a co-working shared space or anything like that. I remodeled the bathrooms, and I made the offices kind of like trendy or attractive. I repainted the offices and put up like a shiplap wall on one of the walls, and so it was kind of different kinds of barnwood or just different kind of trendy features, so someone could walk in there and say, "Oh, okay, that's cool. I can picture myself working for 8 hours a day in this office." And so that's really what ended up happening. It took me a little longer than I thought it would to get offices leased up, and so that was definitely a lesson. But I did get it fully occupied, and the value add strategy in these commercial properties is to add value and then sell. Because once you increase the income, you increase the value of the property, and then it becomes attractive to other investors. And so that's exactly what I did. I got it leased up. I did some other capital things, like I repaved the parking lot and did some things like that. And so made it really attractive to another investor. And so I told you I bought it for $500,000. I put in about, I'm guessing I put in somewhere around $75,000 into the property. And then I sold it for, gosh, what did I sell it for? I sold it for $700,000. And so after all fees and my rehab expenses, I think I ended up making about $110,000 on that property. So after holding it for 18 months, it's not like a home run of a deal, but hey, pretty good, making $110,000. And then I did not pay taxes. I did not pay capital gains taxes on that $110,000. I ended up rolling that money into another property. And so then I used the proceeds from that to buy an industrial property. And so I never touched the proceeds. I rolled it into another property. And so that transaction worked out really well. Learned tons of lessons, made a little money along the way. And so that's kind of how I like my real estate deals to go.
Absolutely.